Today's daf is daf Yud Aleph. And we're going to begin with the Mishnah. And the Mishnah says that Mozgulo es hakos, they poured for him a cup of wine. The Omer, and he declared, Harei Nazir mimenu. And the simple shot seems to be that he wants to be a Nazir just from this one cup of wine. And yet, the Mishnah says, Harei zen Nazir, v'chalam olav kol dinei Nazirus. And this is going to apply even according to Rav Shimon, who said back on the Gimel Mikbeis that Nazirus is only chal when you're Mazir Atzmo Mikol Nazirus, Mikol Yoni Nazirus, Yain, Tuma, and Tiglachas. And when a person says Hareni Nazir Min Hachartzanim, he accepts upon himself a limited Nazirus, Eino Nazir. But here, even Rav Shimon would concede that when he says Harei Nazir Mimenu, the Nazirus is chal, because he never said explicitly that I'm excluding Yain from my Nazirus. He did say Harei Nazir, and that generates a chalos Nazirus. That constitutes a kabbalos Nazirus. And although he added the word Mimenu, we still see this as a yad l'nazirus, and we focus on the beginning of his statement of Harei Nazir, and we consider it as a kabbalas nazirus, and it generates the entire package, the entire enterprise of nazirus. And the classic case of yad l'nazirus would be when he says Hareni or aha, and then there's a Nazir over Lefana. The Mishnah continues, Maisa v'isha akashahoisa shikora, she was intoxicated. Umazgala sakos shel yain, they poured a cup of wine. They were apparently trying to, in a sense, aggravate her or get her to drink more wine. And she declared, V'omra harei nazira mimenu. Amu chachamim, lo niskavna Elolomar Harehu Alai Carbon. She was only generating an Easter neder on this particular cup of wine as a carbon. And the Easter neder is Chalan Yain, but only neder, not Nazir. So the Gemara right away asks, Maiso Listar, isn't this story that the Mishnah is recording here a contradiction to its original statement? Because Amr Beresha, originally you said that when they bring him a cup of wine, and he says, Harei Nazir mimenu harei zen Nazir. His Nazirus is chal, is a valid kabbalas Nazirus. And yet, Maisa v'isha achas indicates that when they brought her a cup of wine, she was a little bit drunk, and she declared Harei Nazir mimenu. The Chachamim said she didn't have an intention of accepting Nazirus. There's no kavanah for an Easter neder, for an Easter Nazirus, but only for an Easter neder. It's Alma Bahai the Oster, or Yena Chrina Shar. You see that she only took a neder vis-a-vis this one cup of wine, but she did not accept her upon herself Nazirus. And it seems to be a contradiction. Now we have to point out here on the side that she wasn't totally drunk, like what we call Shekruso Shalot, because then her halachically, legally, her maisim are not valid, and dvarim are not kayom. But rather, she was still in a state where any avera or any kabbalah that she did would be considered like a pikachas. She's still within the realm of sanity, right? She's not out of it, so to speak. And this is pointed out by the Rambam here in Pirush HaMishnah. We go on. We have to add a few words to the Mishnah. And we're going to add something wedged between the Reish and the Sefer. Mozgulos hakos. Yom Harei Nazir mimenu harei zen Nazir. In Shikarhu, if he was intoxicated and they poured him another glass of wine, the Omer declares Harei Nazir mimenu, Eino Nos. He's not a Nos. And of course, the Maisa now is going to support that middle piece that we're adding to the Mishnah. Why is he not a Nazir? My time, huh? Why do we say that Hareni Nazir Mimenu in this particular case, where he was a shikar, and they brought him another cup of wine? It's Kiman di Omar Harel like carbon, who is only accepting upon himself a neder, like a carbon, that this coast is like a carbon, and he's enjoining himself from drinking this particular coast. Why do we say that this is a lashon of neder? He didn't say konam kos zelai. He said hareni nazir. And the Gemara says Savar, he was suspicious, and he anticipated that these people are trying to goad him on, get him to take another drink. And therefore, he felt that if he would use a lashon neder, they would continue to aggravate him and tempt him to drink wine. If he just said that this wine is also beneder, the konam, he wanted to do something more dramatic that would finally put an end to their enterprise, their program of trying to get him more and more drunk. Instead, he figured they'll say something more all-encompassing, and they'll understand not to tempt him and goad him on anymore. So he said, Hareni Nazir Mimenu. And they would get the idea clearly that he is finished. He can't drink any more wine. They'll be convinced that they have to cease their program of trying to get him more and more drunk. But in truth, his kavanah was not to accept Nazirus. He was just using it as a method, kind of like Nidre Zirazin, like we learned. And he only really wanted to take a neder from this particular cup. And now the Mishnah makes sense. Maisa, Nami the Isha Achas, the same story happened with a woman. She was a shikora. They brought her a cup of wine. She said, Areni Nazir Mimenu. And the Chacham said that she didn't have in mind to accept upon herself Nazirus, but rather a neder, enjoining herself from drinking that one particular cup of wine. The next Mishnah is going to give us three different dinim and scenarios in which there's no kabbalas Nazirus. Number one, Hareni Nazir Avanasha Ehe Shosa Yain. He takes upon himself a Nazirus. So let me just go back to my little bit of an introduction here. These are different scenarios where it may seem like he's not really being the Kabbalah Nazirus, but yet, at least according to some Tanoim, it may be that it is a valid Nazirus, like in this first case, where he makes a condition that he'll be allowed to drink wine, or Mitam L'Meisum, he'll be permitted to go into a cemetery and be Mitami himself to a mess. And the Mishnah says, Harei Zed Nazir, the Asavakula, that even though he tried to accept a limited and partial Nazirus, the Nazirus is called as a total, all-encompassing enterprise. And it'll be also even in Yayin and even in Tuma, even though he wasn't really interested in accepting those Isurim. And this is based on the sheet of the Chachamim. We're not sure about Reb Shimon. Right? Reb Shimon said that in the case of Hareni Nazir and Achartzanim, he's not a Nazir. But the Chachamim disagreed. They were of the opinion that if a person takes upon himself Nazirus, vis-a-vis one of the particular Isuri Nazirus, the Nazirus is Chal, L'chol Dinav, L'chol V'Tukeha, as an enterprise, as a totality, which the Chacham Daf Gimel and Beis derived from the pasuk Yayin v'Shecher Yazir, Afil Lo Nazir El Yisra Echad Chalav Nazirus. And here too, Hareni Nazir Amanas She'eya Shosa Yayin, so he's not accepting the entire package, is Chal of Nazirus Gemura. The entire package of Nazirus will be Chal because he accepted upon himself Nazirus from one or the other of the Surei Nazir. And as to whether Reb Shimon might agree in this case, that we're going to see here in our Gemara. Mishnah continues, Omer, a man says, Hareini Nazir, and then he adds that Yodea Nishiyesh Nazir Savo, Eini Yodea Shan Nazir also B'yayin. He claims that when he took the neder, he was not aware of the fact that Naziris includes Isur Yayin, and therefore he never accepted upon himself Isur Yayin. And here the Mishnah is going to record the machlokas between the Tanakhama and Reb Shimon, whether or not a Naziris in which he was makabel only partial Naziris is chal as an enterprise in its totality. And therefore the Mishnah first quoting the sheet of the Chachamim, Harezeh Asu. And as we said before, these are the Chacham back on Daf Gimel and Beis who had the Alfusa that once he's makabel part of the Naziris, then the entire package is chal. It's a full-fledged Kabbalah's Naziris. Reb Shimon, however, Reb Shimon is of the opinion that either accepts upon himself the entire package of Naziris, or it's not chal at all. It's an all or nothing proposition. And here, the Naziris is not chal until he accepts upon himself both Yayin, Tuma, and also Tiglachas. Now, what would Reb Shimon say about the Reisha of that Mishnah, where he said, I don't want to accept upon myself the Isur of Shtiyas Yayin or the Tumas Mes? That we'll see in the Sugya immediately. But first, there's another din that's formulated here in our Mishnah. The man says, already Nazir, and then he says, Yodea Nisha Nazir also be Yayin. Avol Savra Yisi, I thought when I took the Neder Shechachamim Matirin with Mipnei She'ein Ani Yachol Lichios Ela B'Yayin. Apparently, back in the time of Chazal, and maybe even today, there are people who, for health reasons, have to drink wine, certain kinds of wine that are healthy. And he thought when he took his Naziris upon himself, and he said already Nazir, that surely the Chacham will allow him, because of his health situation and the mitigating circumstances of this individual, he as an individual who for health reasons have to drink wine, they would certainly allow me to drink wine. They understand that I cannot survive, I cannot be Mekayim, the Naziris, vis-a-vis Isur Yayin. Oh, alternatively, my sole source of income is my employment as a gravedigger. And therefore, for sure, the Chachamim will allow me, despite the fact that I'm a Nazir, to be Matami Levesi. This Harezeh Mutter, here the Chachamim Dafka are of the opinion that there's no Naziris at all in this case. There's such a fundamental mistake in his understanding of what Naziris is and his intention that the Naziris is not chal. Reb Shimon also, Reb Shimon says no. All the Yisuri Naziris will be chal on it. Now the Gemara goes back to the issue that we indicated before. According to Reb Shimon back on Daf Gimel and Beis, that Naziris is not chal until you accept all the Yisuri Naziris, Yayin, Tum, and Tiglachas. Would Rabbi Shimon, who is mocked in the case of a person who didn't realize and therefore didn't accept upon himself the Yisur Yayin, would he disagree, Rabbi Shimon? But Liflog Nami Rabbi Shimon Bereisha, in the opening statement where he explicitly made a Tanai, Almanas She'ehei Shosa Yayin. He did not accept upon himself the Isur Shtiyas Yayin. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Cholok Hayir Reb Shimon Af Bereisha. When Reb Shimon's opinion, as a dissenting opinion, is quoted in the middle part of that Mishnah, which we call the Sefer, is that opinion of Reb Shimon related to the Reisha as well, in which he's a dissenting view. And in both cases, the first and the second, whether it's a case where he explicitly makes a Tanai that he doesn't want to accept upon himself the Isur Yain, or where he claims he didn't know that Kabbalas Naziris entails an Isur Yain. In both cases, says Rabbi Shulman Levi, will have a machlokas here between Chacham and Rabbi Shimon. Whereas the Chacham hold that if you accept any part of Naziris, it's automatically called as a package deal on all three Suri Naziris. And Rabbi Shimon says, no, either all or nothing. Either he accepts the entire package upon himself, or it's not a Kabbalas Naziris at all. And therefore, Rabbi Shimon will argue against the Chacham, even in the Reisha, the opening statement in our Mishnah, where he makes a Tanai, and he says, I don't want to accept an Isur Yain. That's not a Kabbalas Naziris. However, Ravina disagrees with Rabbi Shulman Levi, and he says that Bereishal or Polygraption, the Mishnah deliberately omitted mention of Rabbi Shimon in the Reisha. And in a case where he makes a Tanai of Almanas, Shehei Shosa Yain, Rabbi Shimon did not disagree with the Chachamim, but rather conceded that he accepted upon himself a valid, binding Kabbalas Naziris on everything, including Yain. And why is that? My time up. Mishum Davili Masna, Mashakos B'Torah, V'chol Masna, Mashakos B'Torah, Tno Batel. When a person adds a Tanai that contradicts the Torah law, the Torah designed Naziris as a three-package deal that includes also the Isur Yain, and he makes it Tanai, no, I'm going to be a Nazir without the Isur Yain. He's contravening the law of the Torah, and the Torah never gave a person a power and authority to make a Tanai that contradicts the Torah law. So the moment he said Harini Nazir, all of the Naziris is Chalalav, and Ravina insists that even Reb Shimon would agree, because there's no such thing as adding a Tanai that would contradict the Torah law and saying I'm a Kabbalah Naziris, but without the Isur Yain. And now the Gemara is going to clarify Rabbi Shulman Levi's opinion that Rabbi Shimon would disagree even in the Reisha. And this despite the fact that Rabbi Shulman Levi does not deny the principle of Mashkos Torah to no butter. And Rabbi Shulman Levi Amalachah, he would answer the following: hi, when this person uses the terminology almanas, he did not use it and intend to use it in the classic formulation, the classic language of a Tanai, but rather kirchutz damid. In other words, he's accepting only part of the Naziris, chutz mi shtiyas yain. He's excluding the Isur of shtiyas yain in his Kabbalas Naziris. And therefore, if Shimon is going to hold, as we said on Daf Gimel and Beis, that unless you accept the entire package, it's not Naziris. But the Gemara goes on and quotes an explicit price, Tanya Kavos in the Ravina, and this price says, Omar, he declares, already knows Omanas, Shehei Shosa Yain, Umitamilumesim, so far it's identical to our Mishnah, the Reisha of our Mishnah. But then it says, Harini Nazir, the Asur, Harez and Nazir, the Asur B'Kulam, the entire Naziris is Chal as a package, and why? Mipneshu Masna Mashikos of the Torah. So this Brisa, like Ravina, took him literally in the classic formulation of a Tanai of Almanas, the Chol, and the Brisa concludes by invoking the famous principle of Masna Mashikos B'Torah, Tno Batel. The Mishnah says, Yodei Anisha Nazir Asur B'Yain. Aval Sover Yisin Shechacham Matirli Es Isur Yain Arez and Mutar Reb Shimon Osir. So the Gemara immediately asks a steer of Amrit Reisha Asur. In the case of in the Reisha of the Mishnah, where he knows that Naziris includes an Isur Yain, where he knows that there's an entity of Naziris, but he doesn't know that Naziris includes an Isur Yain. The Chacham said he's Asur. And Reb Shimon was the one who was Matir, because Reb Shimon says that if he doesn't know about the Isur Nazir, that Yain to Nazir, then he didn't accept the entire package of Naziris. So therefore, in this last case in the Mishnah, the Sefer, when he says that he thinks the Rabbanan will be Matir of an Isur Yain, then The Chachamim should have said, in consistent with their opinion, that he accepts upon himself the entire Nazirus. Even though he thinks in his mind the Chacham will remove the Isser of Shtias Yayin or Dula Mason. And Rav Shimon Afka, he's the one who should have been Matir in the Sefer, because in his mind, the Rabbanu will allow him to drink wine. So he never accepted the entire package of Nazirus. And the Gemara answers that we should change the gears to the Mishnah of Manami, and in the Sefer we should say, according to that Chachamim, Hareza Asur, he was not interested in the Isur Yayin, but nevertheless, once he accepts Nazirus, Hareni Nazir, he's the Nazir for everything, and it's an all-inclusive Isur Nazir of Shimon Matin. And now the Gemara is going to try to reconcile the text as we have it, without having to change the opinions of Rav Shimon and the Chachamim as recorded in the Mishnah. And the Gemara explains it in the following way. Hasam, there, and here we turn to Daf Yud Aleph on the base, in the ratio, when he says, I know very well that Nazirus includes an Isur Yain. I'm sorry, I know very well that I want to be a Nazir. And I recognize the entity of the enterprise of Nazirus. I just don't know that Yain is Asur. So when the Gemara here uses the word Reisha, it means the Sefer of the Reisha, or the middle case of the Mishnah, where he says, Eini yodea she'nazir asur b'yayin. Kigon, the Nazir mechadav. His initial Kabbalah's Nazirus was only on one of the Isurei Nazir. So he was Makabal Nazirus. Let's say, for example, he Kigon the Nazar Mechada, Lo Kibel Nazirus El Me'echad Isurei Nazir. And he says that Miktas Haisurim Lo Yodel. It's Rabbanon, the Amri, the Rabbanon of Daf Gimel Beis that we mentioned earlier, the Afilo Nazar and the Achas Mehem, Harei Havi Nazir V'Yosef. And the Rabbanon say that even if he accepted only one Isur Nazir, then the Nazirus is Chal as a package. And therefore, here too, even though he did not accept upon himself Nazirus Miyayin, because nevertheless, he accepted upon himself the other Isurim, and he's a Nazir. And therefore, all Isuri Nazir are Chalim, like Shimon the Omar Achiyazer Mikulam. And according to Shimon, the Nazirus is not Chalim until he accepts upon himself the entire package. And he accepts upon himself Nazirus from all three Isurim. Until that, he's not a Nazir. So here too, since he was of the opinion, mistakenly, that there's no Isur Yayin, he didn't accept upon himself Isur Yayin, because any of Desha Nazir Asur Yayin, therefore Mutter, his Nazirus is not Chal. But in the case of the Sefer, we're not talking about a person who at the time of his Kabbalah's Nazirus had a limited acceptance of Nazirus, did not make cool, but on the contrary, he accepted all the Suri Nazir, but afterwards he changed his mind. He had regret. The Ishtil Michada, and he went to a Chacham and asked the Chacham, would he be Matir one of the various Isurei Nazir? Let's say if it's the Isur Yayin or the Isur Tumah, and he regrets that he took it upon himself. And he anticipates that the Chacham will certainly be Matir's Neder. That's called the Ichal Michada. L'Rabbanan Diamri Afilo Nazir Elo Meyachas Mehem Ki Mitchell Bechada V'Nayu Ishtere. According to the Chachamim, although they hold that he only has to take a neder of Nazirus on one of the Isuri Nazir, and then it's Chal vis-a-vis all the Isuri Nazir as a package deal, but in a case where he comes in front of a Chacham to be shown on his Nazirus, and he has remorse, then even if he is matir through the chacham only one of the three surim, and the chacham went ahead and was matir is Nazirus vis-a-vis one of the three surim, ishtere. He's mutter the entire enterprise of Nazirus because it works in two directions. Just like as far as Kabbal's Nazirus is concerned, the chacham hold that it's an enterprise that's indivisible, it's one entity, and if he accepts one Eastern Nazir, he's a Nazir for everything. Then so too, in the opposite direction, when he was mischaret and he had remorse, and he was shol l'chachma on one of these three Nazir, we're going to be mad to the entire Nazir. So it works in both directions. Reb Shimon the Omachi Yaza Mikulam, Reb Shimon, who's the one who says that a Nazir, a Kabbal's Nazir only applies if he accepts upon himself all three Surim, his key, Mitchell, Nami, Yahu, when he comes in front of the Chacham, and he was shoel on one of these surim, ad Mitchell Mikulo, he has to be shoel on the entire enterprise of Nazirus. And if he wants to be matir's Nazirus, he has to be miscarried on the entire package. It's again an inseparable, indivisible package deal. That's why it says in our Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon Oser, Rabbi Shimon holds that when he was nishal on only one Isur, that she'elas chacham is not valid. And as we said before, if he's mischared, he has to be mischared on the entire package as an entity. It's indivisible on all three Isurim. And here, he was only shoel on one of the three Isurim.